So for those of you who have been following my channel for a while, you know that I love recommending books. There's something about matching someone with the perfect book for their taste that just brings me a lot of joy. And another aspect of recommending books that I love is just getting to shove all of my faves in your faces. So in celebration of hitting 50,000 subscribers, thank you all so much, I wanted to do a bit of a personalized recommendations video. So I put up a story on Instagram and I asked a bunch of you to tell me some tropes that you wanted to see in books, you know, the types of books that you wanted to read, or to tell me a book that you wanted something similar to. So this will sort of be like an if you like this then read this video, but a little bit more personalized. And for those of you who are new here, which there are a lot of apparently, I'm Jananie and this is my channel, This Story Ain't Over, and I'm gonna be recommending a bunch of books for you today. Alright, so the first recommendation that someone's looking for is right now I'm going through a reading slump. Help me to cope up with that. So one of my most recent videos was fast reads to read during the shortest month of the year, and I will link that above here. But that's a great place to find a bunch of fast reads that you can read really quickly, and that should hopefully get you out of a reading slump. I also did a video a couple years ago, I think, about just reading slumps and how I was in one, and there are a lot of recommendations of how to get out of one in that video, so I'll also link that down below or on the screen. Someone asked something fantasy but not so many books in a series like Shadowhunters. So if you like Shadowhunters, then I would definitely recommend picking up Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. It's similar to Shadowhunters in the sense that there are demons and a supernatural aspect kind of lurking in our contemporary world, but this features a black main character and has some really interesting historical elements and plot twists, but it's also only one book so far, and I only think it's going to be like a few more books. Like, it's definitely not going to be something as long as the Shadowhunters series, so it's a great one to start with. Someone asked for Romcom book recs, so I have a bunch of books for that, and I plan to do a full video on this eventually, but a few that I want to recommend are Again But Better by Christine Riccio. So this is definitely a straight up rom-com. Like, I feel like it could definitely be a movie. There's so many parts to this book that just like played like a movie scene in my head, and a huge part of that is the way that she integrates music into the book, and also just the way that the romance is a huge focus in the book. But there's also the element of the main character's growth as well, which I really enjoyed. So I highly recommend if you're looking for a straight rom-com. I would also recommend the Sandhya Menon books. So From Twinkle with Love, There's Something About Sweetie, When Dimple Met Rishi, and 10 Things I Hate About Pinky. These are all rom-coms with South Asian main leads, and they're just so much fun and just so adorable. And I love them because all the main characters are kind of special in some way. Like, Dimple is really into tech, Sweetie is just a very kind soul and is trying to be unapologetically herself. Twinkle is really into like film and TV, and she wants to be like a famous filmmaker one day. And so they start off with a really fun premise, and then they all have a really cute romance with the male character, and it's just adorable and just so sweet. So yeah, super adorable rom-coms if you are looking for some. Alright, the next one is Warm and Fuzzy, Maybe Romance. So I definitely recommend I'll Be the One by Lila Lee. This is definitely a really warm and fuzzy book. I just love the main character. She is just a sweet and wonderful human and is just trying to be unapologetically herself. She's trying to enter a K-pop competition to become a K-pop star, but her mother doesn't really want her to enter because she thinks she's too fat to be like this K-pop star. And so Sky, our main character, is trying to prove her mother wrong, and she is just a really sweet character, and I think that's what just gives me the really warm feeling. It does have a little bit of a romance, but it's like not the main focus, and it's also just really sweet and warm and adorable, and the male character is like a very sweet and warm and kind of timid character as well. Alright, someone asked best books with plot twists. So I have a couple for this. So you cannot go wrong with the Poppy War series if you're looking for plot twists, because everyone in this series is always betraying each other, and it's just such a great time and just always keeps you on your toes, and I absolutely love it. It is a like epic fantasy series set in an Asian inspired world and is heavily inspired by history. But yeah, there's a lot of like war and military and a lot of betrayals and plot twists that you never see coming, and I just absolutely love it so much. Another series with some great plot twists is the Illuminae series by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. These books were like made to have a bunch of twists. You just never see them coming and they just blow your mind, when you're reading the books. This is a really cool sci-fi series told in a very unique format. So it's told in a dossier format where you are seeing different documents and surveillance footage and IMs between characters, and you're not really getting a regular narrative. And so because of that, the way that the plot twists come is just very interesting and made for a really cool experience. I also highly recommend the audiobook if you are planning to pick up this series. Alright, the next person asks, people that fake being in a relationship for some reason then start to fall for each other. So this is the fake dating trope, which I absolutely love, and my favorite book to pull this off is definitely Frankly in Love by David Yoon. This features our main character, Frank, who is a Korean American kid, and he has this crush on this white girl in his school, but he knows his Korean parents would never approve, and so he ends up creating this agreement with his friend Joy, who is also Korean American, and she's dating this like Chinese guy who her parents would also not approve of, and so the two of them decide to fake date to kind of take the pressure off of their own relationships and keep their parents from being suspicious. But obviously, things do not go the way they planned and they start to fall for each other, and it's honestly so much fun. I love this book, not mainly because of the fake dating part, but because of the main character and because of the other like family aspects to the story. But I love this because it was a fake dating trope that like was really rooted in the, you know, cultural aspects of their lives. So I really loved it. Someone asked for childhood friends to lovers trope. One of my favorite books that does this is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about this series, but it is one of my favorites, and I actually love the romance in this series between Alina and Mal. They are childhood friends. They grew up in an orphanage as children, and they stay together as they enter the army and then end up getting whisked away in very crazy situations in the course of this fantasy book. But yeah, if you're looking for a childhood friends to lovers trope, this one definitely has it. I don't know of a lot of other childhood friends to lovers tropes in books that I've read. I've seen it a lot in movies, but I don't think I've seen a lot in books. So if you guys have any recommendations for that, leave them down below. Alright, someone asked for a Victorian magic fantasy. I would try out Rebel Mechanics by Shauna Swenson. I read this like so long ago, but it is set in America actually during the 1800s. And in this version of like history, there's magic, and so that's what's kept the British in America, and so the American Revolution never happened. And so all of the like upper class British people have magic, and they're called magisters. And so in this book, the main character goes off to become a governess for one of these magisters, and she's going off to New York, but she ends up getting caught up in the like rebellion revolution of these Americans who don't have magic trying to rise up against the British with their magic. And it's very interesting in the way that it also pits like magic and technology against each other, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, really fun. And then I would also recommend the Last Hour series by Cassandra Clare, specifically Chain of Gold, Chain of Iron. These ones, I don't know if they're set in like the Victorian era. They might be like a little bit later, but they are set in London and like with Shadowhunters. So there's like magical aspects to it, and they're all like going off to balls and like, you know, doing picnics in the park, and it's just all very dramatic and adorable, and you know, they're getting married, and it's just so much fun. So yeah, it feels very Bridgerton in some ways, but like with magic, so totally fun. Alright, the next person asked for book recs focusing on South Asian main characters. So I would definitely recommend anything by Roshni Chokshi. She also has another series, Our Shot and the End of Time. They're middle grade books, but I absolutely love her two debut novels. So The Star-Touched Queen and A Crown of Wishes. These two are kind of companion novels, but they do follow different main characters. And what I love about them is that they both involve a lot of magic and also are really inspired by Hindu mythology, which I thought was really nice. And they're just both really beautiful books with some great romance, and just love them. Alright, the next person asked for books set in the 90s with a strong sense of time and place. So for this one, I have to recommend Let Me Hear a Rhyme by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is one of my favorite books set in the 90s because it just really brings to life that time period and the area that it's set in. So it's set in Brooklyn, and it follows three different main characters, Qadir, Jarrell, and Jasmine. And so Jasmine's brother, Steph, was really close to all three of them, and he has recently died. And he had some really great music that, you know, their entire neighborhood and like community loved. And so the three of them are sort of dealing with their grief for Steph, but kind of want to keep him alive through his music. And so they decided to kind of promote Steph's music under this like name called The Architect. But of course they can't keep the secret of their friend's death a secret for very long. It has a little bit of a mystery aspect as well. Alright, the next person asked for something that is super light and fluffy so I can believe in humanity. So I thought that that one was a pretty fun request. So I would definitely recommend The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand. This is definitely a book that is just really light and fluffy and funny and cute, and it definitely gives you faith in humanity, I feel like. But basically it's sort of a retelling of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, but it reimagines it kind of in the modern world, and it follows our main character, Holly, who was visited one Christmas by these 3 different ghosts who were trying to convince her to be a better person, but she refuses to be a better person, and so she becomes one of these ghosts for the next Scrooge, the next year, the next Christmas. And when she refused to become a better person, she also died. This is also an aspect of the story. And so she ends up becoming one of these ghosts, and she is meant to kind of turn this next Scrooge into a better person. And it's this really interesting story because it has a bit of a twist to it as well. And I love the main character because she was just so like against trying to be a better person, but then she ends up like being a better person without even realizing it, and it was just a really great story. Someone asked for my favorite sci-fi books, so I have 2 series that I absolutely love. The first is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I don't have the copy with me right now, that's why I can't show it to you, but this is like a really epic sci-fi series with different planets and different races, and with some really crazy like battles in space, and it's just so much fun. And then the other one that I absolutely love is the Arc of Sides series by Neil Shusterman. This is sort of a dystopian, but it is not like the usual dystopians in why I feel like. It's set far into the future where humanity has kind of conquered death and disease, and so they all live forever basically, and they can kind of regenerate as well, and people just live these endless lives. And so in order to curb population growth, there are these people called Sides who are tasked with sort of gleaning the population and, you know, cutting it down to size. And so it follows 2 main characters who are training to become Sides. And it's a really interesting situation because it sort of feels like a fantasy, but it's really a sci-fi, and it's a really interesting imagination of what our world could be like in the future. Alright, the next person asked for something witchy but not dark. So if you're looking for something not super dark, I would definitely recommend Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson. This follows our main character Mila, whose best friend Riley has just died, and she believes that her best friend's death is somehow connected to some other girls from her school that have also recently died from mysterious circumstances. And so Mila, being a young witch, decides to bring these girls back to life and to figure out how they died and what happened to them. And so it's a bit of a mystery, but it's also really funny in a way because the girls don't recall how they died, and so they are like kind of zombie ghosts that have come back to life and don't know what to do with themselves. So that aspect is really funny, and it's also just a really quick and like fast read with that mystery element, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like although it seems like it has a dark subject matter, it really wasn't tonally dark, so that's why it kind of felt fun and sort of satirical, which was a lot of fun. Someone asked for a romance vibe with LGBT plus characters, so I would definitely recommend I'll Be the One by Lila Lee. The main character in this is bisexual, and then also They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This follows 2 boys falling in love on the last day of their lives, because it's sort of set in like an alternate version of our world, where there's this thing called the Death Cast, which basically is this service that calls you 24 hours before you're about to die, and doesn't tell you how you're gonna die, but just lets you know that this is your last day on Earth, and so, you know, use it wisely type of thing. And it's a really cute love story, which I absolutely loved. Next, someone asked for novels in verse. So I would definitely recommend anything by Elizabeth Acevedo. So these are her 2 books that are written in verse. So The Poet X, which was her debut, and it's just a really amazing coming of age novel following this one main character named Xiomara and dealing with kind of the cultural expectations from her mother, but also just being a teen girl. And then also Clap When You Land, which is a dual perspective book actually, and follows 2 girls who have the same father but didn't know about each other until he died, and they're both dealing with the grief of having lost their father, but also coming to find out that they have this other sister halfway across the world. So one of the girls is in America, and then the other one is in the Dominican Republic. And it ends up being just this really sweet story of the 2 of them kind of learning to accept each other and also going through their grief, and it was just told so beautifully in verse. Alright, the next person asked for books with a lot of action, so I would definitely recommend the Legend series by Marie Lu. I feel like Marie Lu's books are just totally action-packed, like almost every single one of them, but this one it definitely is. There's a lot of like fight scenes and like, you know, trying to steal stuff and different missions that they're trying to pull off, and it's just a lot of fun and really fast-paced and gripping, and definitely feels a little bit like an action movie. Alright, so a lot of you asked for enemies to lovers romances, and I cannot go without recommending the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black, which begins with the Cruel Prince. And in this book, the two main characters sort of start out as enemies, sort of as like each other's bullies in school too, which is interesting, but it follows Carden and Jude, and I love the relationship development in this series, and I also just really love each of the characters on their own as well, and it's just a really fun romance, but also set in this kind of fantasy world with fairies and lots of betrayals and plot twists and just crazy stuff going on. Someone asked for anything with Kaz or Inej vibes, and I would definitely recommend The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi, mainly because in this cast of characters there's like 6 or 5 main characters, but 2 of them are Severin and Lila, and the 2 of them have a very similar sort of dynamic to Kaz and Inej. I feel like Severin is a little bit more soft and not as murderous as Kaz, and Lila is definitely a little bit more warm and talkative than Inej, but their dynamic is quite similar, and Severin has helped out Lila in ways that Kaz also helped out Inej, and they both kind of see each other as home and as someone that they really care about. But there's also this really strong like will they, won't they romance to them as well, in a very similar way to Kaz and Inej. Alright, someone asked for a teamwork type of book, so I decided to go with Warcross by Marie Lu for this recommendation, because in this book, our main character, Amika Chen, is kind of competing in this world championship for Warcross. It's like this virtual reality capture the flag type game, and it has like this huge world championship type of thing going on in Tokyo, and so she is put on a team with a bunch of other gamers who are really good at Warcross, and there's a really strong element of like the team in the book and like them advancing in the championship, but also just becoming friends and working together as a team. And that's also just one of the strong points of the story beyond the romance and the sci-fi elements, so highly recommend for that reason. Alright, next someone asked for an East Asian fantasy other than the Poppy War or These Violent Delights. So I would definitely recommend Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nagan if you have liked both of those. This is an East Asian fantasy and follows our main character, who is something called a paper girl. So in this world there are different kind of castes of beings. So there's like a demon class that have sort of animalistic features, and then there's another caste in the middle which I kind of forget, but then the lowest caste is the paper class, which are basically humans. And in this book there is like this demon king who takes paper brides every year as sort of his concubines, and so the main character is taken as one of these girls, but she ends up sort of falling for one of the other paper girls that are taken in the same year, and it's this really beautiful like queer love story, but also like has some really strong fantasy elements, and it's also a quite cruel world similar to the Poppy War, and there's also like an element of resistance kind of brewing by the end. So someone asked for a deep emotional connection between 2 friends that is not romantic, and I couldn't help but think of Rin and Kite in the Poppy War. I know I already recommended this, but their bond, platonic bond in this series is just so beautiful, and they like their dynamic just makes me so happy, and I love Kite as a character as well. They start off as like, you know, friends when they are very young in an academy in the first book, and they are together through thick and thin throughout the rest of the series, and it is just so heartwarming to see, so highly recommend. Someone asked for YA books that read older, and I would definitely recommend Anna K by Jenny Lee. This book tonally, like the way it's written, feels a bit older, even though it deals with characters who are still in high school, and it has a lot of like scandal and really like lofty themes that I feel like people who are older would also enjoy. And it's also super complex in the themes that it examines, especially to do with like its themes around relationships, and I just really loved it. It is such a great book. I loved our main character Anna K, and I really enjoyed the love story in it as well, but I think the way it's written, it just feels so grand and fantastic that I loved it. It is a retelling of Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, so if you've read that, you know there's very like adult themes in that book, and this kind of tackles those as well. Alright, the next person asked for lighthearted romance with steamy scenes, and I immediately thought of one of my recent reads, which was Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is definitely a like lighthearted, fun romance novel, but with some really cute and steamy scenes in it, but it also has like this really awesome romance in it. And I think the reason I loved it so much was because they sort of start out as like kind of enemies, but really turn into friends. And then the tension sort of just builds from there. And the steamy scenes just have such a great payoff because of the like building tension throughout the entire book. So yeah, it's really great, but it's also like super light and super fluffy and just a lot of fun. Someone asked for something similar to The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh, and I would actually say that if you like that, you might really like These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is a book set in 1920s Shanghai, and it is sort of a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but it has this like really strong supernatural element with this kind of madness or sickness running rampant in Shanghai, and there are these two like opposing gangs in the book, and they speak of a monster kind of roaming and spreading this sickness. And so I feel like it gives you like that like historical vibe of The Beautiful, but also has the supernatural elements that The Beautiful also has. And I also personally just like this one better. Okay, someone asked for fantasy soft boys, and there's no softer boy than Kunal in The Tiger at Midnight by Swati Tirdala. I absolutely love this book, but I really loved it because there is this really interesting dynamic between the two main characters. So it follows Isha and Kunal, and Isha is kind of this like assassin for like one country in the book, and Kunal is this like soldier for the other country in the book, and he is tasked with hunting her down, and they end up in this kind of cat and mouse chase as they're traveling. But Kunal is just like this really sweet and like endearing character. He has a really strong sense of duty, but he is also questioning that sense of duty and the intentions of his country and, you know, what he's really been fighting for. And so it's just really interesting seeing him kind of question his whole identity, but he's also just a really sweet character, and like Isha plays him like a fiddle so many times in this book, just like bats her eyelashes at him, but he has so much compassion and cares so much that he is so kind in places where he could have been really cruel. Yeah, he's just a like soft little muffin, and I highly recommend you pick this up for that reason. Okay, there are so many more like submissions that you guys gave me, so I think I might do a part 2 of this video if you guys end up enjoying this one. But thank you so much for sending in your recommendations, and thank you so much for getting me to 50,000 subscribers. I really appreciate every single one of you who likes, comments, subscribes, and all of you just really do bring a lot of joy to my life. So I just want to say thank you and recommend you a bunch of books. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys if you have like any alternate recommendations for any of the ones that I was like bringing up during this video. I know the people who are looking for recommendations would probably appreciate it as well, and I'm just excited to bring you more videos in the next year and just continue this journey with my channel. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video, and please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!